All right, that was a few less clicks than this morning. It's a little more smooth. Maybe as time goes on, I'll be able to get that going just a little bit faster as I figure out where I'm clicking. Someone did ask me where this is streaming to, and it's streaming to YouTube. And so if you hop on YouTube and search Main and 13th Church of Christ, you'll come across our page. And so that is where it is streaming to. And maybe sometime down the line, if we feel the need to set up a Facebook page and get it streaming there. But we have it streaming in one place, and that's where it is for now. And it is supposed to, YouTube is supposed to archive them after the stream is done. It's supposed to go on the videos page. Sometimes YouTube kind of lags in that. And so like this morning still hasn't posted to the videos page. But at some time it is supposed to post to the videos page, so that if you want to look back on any sermons, if you'll hop on our YouTube page, they should eventually show up on there as we are live streaming them, just so everyone knows that. My Bible is open to 2 Corinthians chapter 8. We're going to be continuing our study in that text. It's good to see everyone out this evening, and it's always such a good thing, a blessing from our God when we can be together. Let's jump right into our study this morning. This evening, we're going to be looking at the first 6 verses here at first, when we look at these Macedonians who gave themselves first to the Lord, as Paul begins discussing a new subject. Really, chapters 8 and 9 go together. I was telling Sister Geraldine, really, it would be great if we could just go through 8 and 9 together. We just don't have enough time to get through that. And so we're going to split 8 and 9 into 2 different lessons, and that's going to take up all of our time just splitting it in 2. But getting into verses 1 and 2, Paul writes, "We want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. For in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part." And so as Paul is getting ready to discuss this contribution that you may remember back from 1 Corinthians chapter 16, that he had commanded them to be gathering together so that that could be sent to the poor and the needy there in this famine that has occurred, he tells them here of these Macedonians, these churches inside Macedonia, so that he can use them as an example to the Corinthians to be very generous in their giving. He is setting them up as an example to the Corinthians so that they will be encouraged to be very generous themselves, because the churches in Macedonia were being very generous in their giving to this cause. So generous, in fact, as we pick up verse 2 again and carry this down into verse 3, he writes, "For in a severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. For they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means of their own accord." And so we learn in verse 2 that in their giving to this cause, they're in the middle of severe affliction themselves. They are in the middle of extreme poverty themselves, and they say, "I want to give to this. I want to be a part of this, to give these things when I don't really have it to give." We're going to see the point being made. And so they are giving extremely generously, experiencing a wealth of generosity in an abundance of joy when they themselves are facing severe affliction and extreme poverty. Let's take verse 3 again and carry this down into verse 4. For they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means of their own accord, begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. And so Paul says they gave according to their means. They did give what they could give, and Paul testifies to that. But he says they also of their own accord, I didn't ask them to do this. I did not put this on them, but of their own accord, they gave beyond their means. And they wanted to take part in this so bad, they begged us. They entreated us to be able to take part in this. Now, your translation where the ESV says favor, yours may say gift, and that is actually an apt translation of this word. It is charis, which is grace. So you can see favor in that, but it could also be gift. That word really could be taken either way inside of this context. And so it does become a question of, is it talking about them begging Paul to accept their gift, which that could very much mean, or it could very much mean the ESV is not incorrect in its rendering either, that it's favor, that they're looking at their being able to give. It's not that they're doing a favor. That's not what it's bringing out. It's that their being able to give is a favor. It is a grace. The very act of their being able to give is a grace. And I think this is where we see the first lesson, the first thought. I have titled this lesson you saw at the beginning, Generous Giving. Where we think about our being generous, a lot of times we like to jump into chapters 8 and 9 and talk about the contribution. And there are applications there. Absolutely, certainly, when we think about giving generously to the cause of the Lord in that way. But not just applying it to that. But if we look at caring for our brothers, giving to those who are in need, and thinking about being generous in doing so, here's the first step toward that. Recognizing it's not a God commanded me to help you. It's a favorable thing, the very thing, it's a gracious thing that I can help, that I am able to give is a favor. And I think that that's set forth in verse 3. I do appreciate the ESV and other translations rendering of this, that it is about the Macedonians recognizing that it's God's grace that they are able to give. And there are a number of scholars who will back up that understanding of this verse, that they recognize God's grace, that they are passing that forward. They're getting to share that with someone else, even though they're in severe affliction, even though they are facing extreme poverty, and they are still giving even beyond their own means. Now, as we work on making this point, I do want us to be careful that we do not see the command in there that says we have to bleed ourselves dry. If we have something left after giving generously, then that means we didn't give enough, because, man, the Macedonians didn't have anything and they still gave. Paul is going to make the point to the Corinthians as we study our way down through this chapter, in telling them, I do not mean for others, verse 13, I do not mean that others should be eased and you burdened, but that as a matter of fairness, your abundance at the present time should supply their need. And so he is not saying that you have to give. If you have something left, that means that you didn't give enough. No, he is just using them as an example. Their eagerness, their diligence, their huge willingness to be given over to this. You see how willing the Macedonians are? I want you to be that willing, Corinthians. I want you to give in that way, which is where we really come to verses 5 and 6 to see why they are so willing to be so generous. Verse 5. And this, not as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord, and then by the will of God to us. Accordingly, we urge Titus that as he had started, so that he should complete among you this act of grace. Here's why they act in that way. Because they don't belong to themselves. They aren't looking out for themselves. They are not making themselves number one and saying that it's all about me. They gave themselves first to the Lord. That this is who they belong to, giving themselves fully, completely, and totally over to the Lord, Paul says, after that. Because everything in service to God comes after that point. Giving ourselves over to God, it says, and then, according to God's will, they gave to us. This is why they were such generous givers. This is why they were so eager and ready to give in this way. Because they belonged to God. That is who they gave themselves to. And this action then flowed out from this. And as we move forward from verse 6, in which he tells Titus that he is used, or Titus, he tells to let me read verse 6 again so I don't misspeak here. Accordingly, we urge Titus that as he had started, so he should complete among you this act of grace. And so he tells Titus to tell them that they are to complete this work, and then uses these Macedonians accordingly as an example for them. And so that's how he is using them in these first 5 to 6 verses. But that takes us into the next section, where as he works on this example, after having used the Macedonians, he's going to tell these Corinthians to prove their love, that their love has been put to the test, or is being put to the test, by their urging them to excel in this generosity. In verse 7, he says, "But as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in all earnestness, and in our love for you, see that you excel in this act of grace also." As we take the first part of this verse where he says, "But as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in all earnestness, and in our love for you," one commentator says of this that when Paul can truthfully avail himself of the opportunity to commend the Corinthians, he does not hesitate to do so. And certainly we see Paul doing that here, that this is something he can commend the Corinthians in. As we work on this list of things that he commends them in, the first 3 things seem to be looking at spiritual gifts. You can find similar things being noted for us back in the first letter that he had written to them, that faith in which from such faith that miracles could be done, speech in matters of the truth, knowledge in matters of the truth. He seems to be looking at spiritual gifts, and certainly we know that these did exist among the Corinthian brethren, and matters had to be straightened out about that inside of the first letter. And so he can commend them in their excelling in these things, and they're having these things. And then as well, when we come to the latter 2, these certainly don't seem to be spiritual gifts in their earnestness, and he can commend them in this. We just finished up our study of chapter 7, where he has learned about their earnestness in making correction, that they had experienced godly sorrow unto repentance, and that they had done so quite earnestly. And then we come to a textual difference in the manuscripts, where the ESV basis says, "in our love for you," and your translation may have that flip-flopped, "in your love for us." And I do think that We can kind of make an argument for both, and certainly it's fitting for what we've seen Paul present inside of this letter in the language of our love for you, where he has shared with them, my heart is open to you. It's your heart that is closed to me, and that's why our relationship is what it is, which would really go to support this reading in our love for you. The difficulty with that is he is listing traits of the Corinthians here. Their faith, their speech, their knowledge, their earnestness. And so in his commendation of them, it would seem to make sense if it is their love for them. And so there is manuscript evidence for both of those things. But here is the point. As we work on bringing all of this together, we have the first part of verse 7, but Paul isn't really focusing on the faith, speech, knowledge, earnestness, and love, whichever way that flows. He is focusing on, he's focusing on, as you have excelled in these things, there's something else you need to excel in as well. You need to excel in this act of grace also. I've just shown you with these Macedonians how they have excelled in this act of grace. That their willingness to give above and beyond, and they're being so eager to the degree that they begged to take part in it. I need you to excel in this grace. This grace of being generous in your giving. And here is what that is going to do, verse 8. I say this not as a command, but to prove by the earnestness of others that your love also is genuine. You will notice in verse 8, we have one of those not but constructions that we talked about not all that long ago, where the not is not necessarily an exclusion of what follows, but rather an emphasis upon that which follows the but, because we do know from 1 Corinthians 16, that was a command. Paul said, you do need to give as I commanded all of the churches in Galatia. And so it is not of necessity that it is not a command, but he's placing emphasis upon the fact that it's to prove, to put to the test by the earnestness of others that your love also is genuine. Here's what they're giving with this generosity is going to do. It's going to prove that their love is genuine. You know what's really easy to do? I love my brothers and my sisters. It's really easy to do, isn't it? We could all open up our mouths and them words can fall right out. Now, what happens when it comes time to put action to those words? What happens when it's time to prove that those words are true? Paul says to these Corinthian brethren, you can claim love for those brothers, but I'm going to put the genuineness of that love to the test. We're going to prove this. The example in that word prove is often used that it was concerning armor, that armor was put to the test to make sure that it's going to hold up in battle, and that's proving armor. And certainly that description of that word is absolutely right, and that's what Paul is telling them. We're going to make sure that holds up in battle. We're going to see that that love is genuine. Hold your place here in 2 Corinthians 8, and let's look at a familiar passage in 1 John. Let's look in 1 John 3 at verses 17 and 18. 1 John 3 and verse 17. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. Paul says, prove your love. Show your love. John said, you have the world's needs. You provide for those things. Paul's telling these Corinthians brethren, you have those things. So you give generously. You have in abundance at this time. So you give generously so that their needs can be met. And then in verse 9, he reaches the pinnacle of example in proving this point. In verse 9, he says, for you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you by his poverty might become rich. You know what Jesus did for you? Jesus was rich. Jesus was rich beyond all measure. And he said that's not a thing worthy of being grasped. Jesus gave that up, and Jesus came down to this world in poverty so that someone else could be made rich. Jesus gave so generously. And in the picture of love, that is it. That is the picture of love. That's what John paints for us in his letter, that God showed us what love is in this act. And Jesus' giving of himself so generously, that is love. So Paul tells these brethren, your love is being tested. It's being proven. And you're excelling in this generous giving, so you need to finish this work. Let's look at verses 10 and 11. And in this matter I give my judgment. This benefits you, who a year ago started not only to do this work, but also to desire to do it. So now finish doing it as well, so that your readiness in desiring it may be matched by your completing it out of what you have. Excuse me, I'm sorry this evening. I got hiccups there. But in looking at verses 10 and 11, I really like the New King James translation there. I don't have that to pull up, but for those of you that have that in front of you, where it connects these two sentences into being one sentence, I think that that is really well done, and it really brings out the thought that Paul is addressing inside of these verses. I've kind of paraphrased him into one short sentence, and I hope you can see the ideal inside of this, where what he is saying to them is it's going to be beneficial to you. It is going to benefit you to finish this work that you have started it, and you did desire to do it. You are desiring to do it, but the benefit's going to come when you finish the work. The benefit is going to come when you complete the work. I'll tell you what, this is a verse for Colton. You know what Colton is really good at doing? Desiring and starting. Colton is excellent at desiring and starting. You should see the stack of cards on my desk that were born out of desire and starting, that need to be packed up and mailed out. Because the beneficial part, the good part, it was desiring is good. We need to desire good works. Starting is good. We need to start good works. But you know the beneficial part? Completing, doing. Says, here's what's going to benefit you, Corinthians. You did desire to do this good work, and you even started doing it, but something has held you up. And I think we're going to see clues in verse 12 about what has held them up. But something has held you up, and so now you need to complete it. You need to bring it to its end so that it does what it was supposed to do. That is where the benefit is going to be. Finish the work that you desire and that you had started, which takes us into verse 12. For if the readiness is there, it is acceptable according to what a person has, not according to what he does not have. Earlier, when I jumped into verse 13, it was verse 12 that I should have read. But as he brings out this statement, if there is this willingness within you, if there is this desire within you, it's acceptable for what you have, not for what you don't have. You don't have to give what you don't have. If you are willing and ready to give generously, you give what you have. It seems to me from this verse that what's holding the Corinthians up is that they want to give more. They want to give what they don't have to give. And so that's kind of hindered them in the work. That, well, we can't really do what we want to do. And so since we can't give above and beyond, well, we're just kind of held up here until we get to the point of being able to give above and beyond. And Paul is telling them where your willingness is when you have this readiness and you want to be able to give. You don't have to give more than you are able to give because this readiness is there. Because you have this desire within you to want to give and you have started this work, don't let that stop you. You complete the work. I've paraphrased him as saying this. If you have a willingness, and I borrowed that, I believe, from the New King James. If you have a willingness for the work, don't let what you can't give stop you from giving what you can. I think that application is in much more than just contribution in monetary giving to anyone who is in need. Where we do become hindered by this stumbling block of I want to do big, great things. I want to do huge things for a great number of many people, and I don't have the means to do that. I do not have the ability to do that. Whatever it is that is the hindering factor in my doing that big, great thing, I don't have it. And so if I can't do the big, great thing, instead of starting the thing I can do, I become discouraged by the fact of the thing I can't do, and I don't do anything. Paul says, you have that willingness. You want to do the work, do it, complete it, bring it to its end so that it can accomplish its work, so that it can do what it is supposed to do. Don't let what you can't do stop you from what you can do. Now, I do want to highlight something inside of this verse that is really, really important for us to see as he uses that language, for if the readiness is there. Because this is what we do not need to read this verse as saying. This verse says, I can get by on as little as possible, and that's going to be acceptable. That says, as little as I can do, then that's going to be what is acceptable to God. And I want you to notice that readiness is not in that statement. A desire, a willingness to be given over to the work is not in that statement. The only readiness inside of that statement or willingness inside of that statement is how little can I do to get by? And that's not our goal. That's not what we are trying to do. That's part of the point of opening up with the Macedonians in the first 5 verses. They gave themselves to the Lord fully, completely, totally. They gave all that they could do, and that's what this eagerness sprung out of. And that's what he's telling these Corinthians. If you have that desire, you have that eagerness, you have that readiness to be about the work, then what you can do is acceptable, not what you can't do. But then he goes on to explain, as he puts parameters upon this in their giving, where we look at verses 13 through 15. For I do not mean that others should be eased and you burdened, but that as a matter of fairness, your abundance at the present time should supply their need, so that their abundance may supply your need, that there may be fairness, as it is written, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. And so he's telling them, now I'm not saying, once more, that you give to the degree that you have nothing left, so that you become burdened and that they have absolutely everything. They have abundance and now you have nothing. Then they're just going to have to send it right back, and you're going to be sending it back and forth. He's telling them, that's not my point. My point is, right now you have much. Right now you have abundance, and they have lack. That they are lacking in what they need. So out of your abundance, out of what you have to give to them, you provide for their needs so that there is this fairness. That's the way things are at this time, that you have much, you have abundance, and so provide for their needs. And the time may come, you have a little bit. You don't have very much, and they have abundance, and they will provide for your needs. And he quotes from Exodus 16 and verse 18 to prove this point, that as the Israelites were gathering their food, the amount that everyone gathered, whether they gathered a lot or they had gathered a little, it was enough for them. No one was in need. And so he's telling them, I'm not telling you send everything to them so that now you're in need. I'm not telling you you become burdened. I'm telling you be generous and provide for their needs. I think that's a lesson for us. For us to think about our generosity. For us to think about helping our brothers and sisters as there is opportunity and need to do so. And we find ourselves right square in 1 John. You who have the things of this world, we have them. And we have that opportunity to provide for their needs. What good does it do? I love you. Hope you do okay. And then don't do anything. I'm going to put your love to the test here. Provide for their needs. Don't just desire the good thing for them. Desiring that is good. We should desire to want to help. Don't just start the good thing. Starting the good thing is good, but don't end it there. Finish the work, so that that need can be met, is what he is driving home to them in this section, and certainly is an excellent lesson for us. But that does bring us to the latter part of this, and we are going to go through this rather quickly, as what Paul is doing in this section is telling them, as he and some of the brothers that are traveling with them, how this money, how the distribution of this contribution, not necessarily money or money alone, but the things that the Corinthians are contributing to them, how that's going to be distributed. And this section is his letting them know that this is going to be done rightly. It's going to be done fairly, and you can be sure that I'm going to act this way in an honorable way. And that's what he's doing in this section. So we'll go through it rather quickly here, looking at verses 16 through 19. But thanks be to God who put into the heart of Titus the same earnest care I have for you. For he not only accepted our appeal, but being himself very earnest, he is going to you of his own accord. With him we are sending the brother who is famous among all the churches for his preaching of the gospel. And not only that, but he has been appointed by the churches to travel with us as we carry out this act of grace that is being ministered by us for the glory of the Lord himself and to show our good will. And so he tells them of Titus's earnestness, that he is desiring to come to them, and he tells them how that he, Titus, and this other brother that he does not name, lots of guesses are out there. I'm not even going to venture a guess. Paul does not name who this particular brother is. He only notes his being respected, that he is a preacher of the word, and he is respected among the congregations. And certainly in a matter like this, you want someone who is respected, that is looked up upon. And so he says of these three brothers, and others traveled with him as well, that they will come, and that this contribution from these brethren, that it is going to be administered as they carry out this act of grace. I don't have it on the screen, but I want you to focus in on the end of verse 19, where Paul talks about what this is about. Remember, we've talked about this letter being about the exaltation of God, and notice what he says: for the glory of the Lord himself and to show our good will. And so as they're working inside of this ministry and carrying out this act of grace, it is to show their goodwill in this matter. But really, we're looking at God being exalted, that God's glory is being shown in this. And that really sets to light this entire section, particularly when we look back at the Macedonians who saw it as favor or grace, that here it is a grace from God that we are able to partake in giving. It is a grace that we are able to do this. And so Paul uses that same language, that they're carrying out this act of grace that is to God's glory when we are able to give in that way. Certainly we're carrying out an act of goodwill in doing so, but that's to the glory of God always. Then verses 20 and 21. We take this course so that no one should blame us about this generous gift that is being administered by us. For we aim at what is honorable, not only in the Lord's sight, but also in the sight of man. Paul says, people want to cast accusations against me. They want to say that I'm just looking out for Paul. I am exalting Paul. He said, here's why we're taking this course of action. Here's why we're acting in this way, so that no one can blame us, so that no one can cast any kind of accusation against us, and so that it can be clearly seen I'm acting honorably. Not only in God's eyes, certainly I'm acting honorably there, but also in the sight of men, that I am acting honorably, and I'm not abusing this money. I'm not abusing you, Corinthians. I'm acting in a right and proper way in carrying this gift that has been given. I'm not robbing the coffers. I'm not taking it for myself. I'm doing with it exactly as you would have done with it. But that then brings us to the close of this chapter. And with them we are sending our brother, whom we have often tested and found earnest in many matters, but who is now more earnest than ever because of his great confidence in you. As for Titus, he is my partner and fellow worker for your benefit. And as for our brothers, they are messengers of the churches, the glory of Christ. So give proof before the churches of your love and of our boasting about you to these men. And so here Paul once more commends those who are going to be transporting this contribution that they are given. And I'm not certain from the language of verse 22 if he is talking about an additional brother, and it kind of sounds that way with them, but there's some grammar at play. He could be talking about the same unnamed brother as well as Titus, since he brings Titus up again. I'm not exactly sure who he is bringing into play with this, but what we can note with certainty is that he's offering commendation. He's saying these are respectful men. These aren't rabble rousers that I just picked up off the street. These are men that are known, are respected for their earnestness. They are messengers of the church to the Lord's glory. I didn't just pick up random people so I could do with this what I wanted to do. He says, no, this is all being done on the up and up. And so he closes then this chapter, and he'll continue the thought in chapter 9. But he closes this chapter, so give proof before the churches of your love and of our boasting about you to these men. We noted previously that Paul has confidence in these brethren. He made that confidence known, and they had lived up to his confidence. And so he says the same thing to them here. I've boasted about you in this matter, and so live up to that. Give proof of your living up to my boasting about you as you give to them this contribution and they carry it to where it needs to be carried to, and give proof, as we noted, of your love. Your love has been put to the test, and so complete the work in your generous giving that their needs might be met. Complete the work. Finish this work that you desired to do and that you have started. To bring these things to a close this evening, we want to think about desiring a good work, starting a good work, and bringing it to completion. Certainly that is true of all good works that can be done. They can be desired, they can be started, and then they can either be completed or they can be stopped. And as we work on making application here at the end, the application we always make, we want to talk about the good work of the giving of ourselves to God. This evening, have you desired to give your life over to God, but you've not even started that work? As I look around, I think that everyone here has perhaps started that work, though I'm not certain. But if you have not started that work this evening, right now, this moment, this is the time to start that work. Give your life to God. But if you have started that work and you've stopped, you're not bringing it to completion, you need to start again. You need to bring the good work of God to completion. And I'll tell you what, that doesn't happen in this life. When we keep on doing that work until we're gone from this world, and God brings it to completion at that time, when we can echo the words of Paul that we're going to get to in 2 Timothy, that we have finished the race. We have completed the course. If you've stopped for whatever reason, whatever hindrance is in front of you that has caused you to stop the giving of yourself to God, set it out of the way. It's not a big enough hindrance. Put it out of the way and get on the work of God. Complete the work that was given to you. And if we can help you with that, won't you come while we stand and sing the song selected? Why keep Jesus waiting?